Bob Menendez is allowed to be free while he awaits sentencing for almost identical charges. So we might see something similar for Adams. Though in the meantime, we have already seen a lot of fallout. Tons of high-ranking city officials have already resigned, such as the police commissioner, the city's top lawyer, and the school's chancellor, all of which led to calls for Adams to resign, such as from New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who wrote on Twitter, "I do not see how Mayor Adams can continue governing New York City. The flood of resignations and vacancies are threatening government function. Non-stop investigations will make it impossible to recruit and retain a qualified administration. For the good of the city, he should resign." With many saying that her calls for a resignation, that's actually pretty notable because while she broadly opposes Adams for being too centrist, she actually rarely talks about New York City politics. But for now, the big question is, what's going to happen with him? Is he going to actually continue to refuse a resignation, or is Governor Kathy Hochul going to force him out of office? Which notably is something she actually has the power to do, though as of recording, she hasn't commented one way or the other. But, it'll be very interesting to see what happens because yes, innocent until proven guilty. And Adams is very adamant that these are all BS charges. But there is a reason that the feds almost literally never lose a case. They almost never bring charges without just a fucking mountain of evidence. So yeah, we will see, but for Adams, it does not look good. Then, shifting gears in online drama/business news, Dr. Disrespect wants his YouTube monetization back. Because as you might remember, he lost it back in June amid reports that he inappropriately messaged a minor over on Twitch, something that he essentially admitted to in a now deleted tweet, though he still claims there was nothing illegal happening, with him then taking a break from streaming, but he made his return a few weeks ago. And now that he's been back and consistently getting hundreds of thousands of people tuning into those streams, he tweeted a screenshot showing that he reapplied for YouTube monetization, with that showing that a decision would likely come in around a month. And all of this happening as analytics group Streams Charts found that as of mid-September, he is the second most watched YouTube gaming streamer in the US this year. He's only behind iShowSpeed. And this is now some reports are saying he's even eyeing a potential return to the Midnight Society studio that he co-founded. And while right now it's unclear if anything's going to come from that, between that and his application for monetization, it seems like he's really launched a full-fledged comeback. But for now, we'll have to wait to see what happens next. And in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts. Also, in another quick piece of news on the note of backlash, let's talk about Margot Robbie, Jacob Elordi, and Emerald Fennell, because they are the center of some good old-fashioned casting backlash right now, with earlier this week it being announced that Margot and Jacob were cast as the leads in Emerald's adaptation of Wuthering Heights, which is a book that you may have read or read the spark notes of in high school. And with that, you had a lot of people pissed off because Jacob is playing the character Heathcliff, who the book refers to as dark-skinned and has various other indicators that the character is not white. And so with that, you have people saying things like his experiences as a man of color influence his entire character and story as a man suffering racist abuse from his adoptive family. Fuck off, Emerald Fennell. As well as, did anyone actually read the book before deciding this? And while some have noted that this is far from the first time Wuthering Heights has been adapted into a film and many white actors like Tom Hardy have played the role of Heathcliff, many say they just believe that times are different now and there is a newfound cultural responsibility in casting these parts. And others saying this just shows that Hollywood is hypocritical because studios always pledge to have diverse casts, but we still end up with situations like this. So this also is some have given grace, noting Emerald Fennell is a director who always has a big take, right? Her swings are pretty big and we don't know what her version of this story is going to be or how she's going to change it. And so actually with that, you have the BBC noting that we don't know what is up her sleeve, but still, quote, there is no doubt that at first glance, the casting seems fundamentally egregiously wrong. It has that mind-boggling, what were they thinking quality, which brings to mind a crass producer in a Hollywood satire barking, Wuthering Heights is drab, let's get Barbie and Elvis to play Kathy and Heathcliff. And well, of course, I'd love to know everyone's thoughts and everything we cover. For this one, I'd really love to know what my literature or film lovers out there are thinking about this. And then, this is so weird. We need to talk about how a Kentucky sheriff is accused of murdering a district judge in his chambers and no one knows why, right? I mean, this whole situation has been this total mystery, confounding and rattling this small Appalachian town of Whitesburg. While many of the details are still unclear, what we do know is that Letcher County Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins has been accused of shooting Judge Kevin Mullins multiple times at the courthouse last Thursday. But since then, very little information has actually come out. But according to Kentucky State Police, the shooting happened after the two men had an argument, but the nature of that argument's unclear. We also saw local outlets reporting that Steins had allegedly walked into the judge's outer chamber where he told employees and others gathered there that he needed to talk to Mullins alone, with the two then going into the judge's inner office, closing the door, and those outside reporting that they heard shots. And after that, Steins just walked out with his hands up and surrendered to authorities who arrested him without incident and later charged him with first-degree murder. But then in his first court appearance yesterday, Steins pleaded not guilty. So while the investigation's still ongoing, that's pretty much all we know right now, right? Law enforcement officials have not yet publicly confirmed a motive, and there doesn't seem to be any obvious one. Reportedly, Steins and Mullins were colleagues who had worked together in various capacities. Like before Steins was elected as sheriff in 2018, he served as Mullins' courtroom bailiff. And then as the county's top-ranking law enforcement officer, he's been responsible for providing security at courthouses, including for judges. Hell, he even had the county circuit court clerk telling reporters they saw the two men heading to lunch together just hours before the shooting, and adding that he had worked with both of them for years and thought they were all friends. Now, all that said, notably here, in addition to the murder charge, Steins is also the subject of a separate federal lawsuit against a former deputy named Ben Fields, who served as Mullins' bailiff after Steins. And specifically, that suit alleges that Fields forced a woman to have sex with him in Mullins' chambers in exchange for keeping her out of jail when she couldn't afford to pay fees for her ankle monitor, with a woman claiming that Fields took her to Mullins' chambers because there were no cameras in there, with then eventually Fields being fired, pleading guilty to multiple charges, and serving time in jail. And while for Mullins, he was not named in the suit, which also didn't say he was aware or alleged that he was involved in any wrongdoing, the complaint did accuse Steins of failing to, quote, adequately train and supervise Fields, and claiming that he knew or should have known his deputy was sexually abusing women in his charge. Also alleging that there are other women who Fields has similarly abused, with it then also being reported that Steins gave a deposition in that case just days before the shooting. All that said, to be very clear, there is no evidence yet that Mullins' death is connected to the suit against Fields or Steins' alleged involvement. We are just currently trying to sift through the publicly available information to get any sort of possible idea, especially because at the hearing yesterday where Steins entered his not guilty plea, he didn't provide any more clues or information. So for now, we'll have to wait to see what comes from the investigation. And as far as what's next, I mean, there's another hearing set this coming Tuesday. And I mean, very notably here, under Kentucky law, Steins' case is eligible for the death penalty. Also, I will say, on the note of Kentucky law, Steins is technically still in office despite the murder charge and will remain in power until he resigns or gets removed by other action. And then, screen protectors on your phone, they serve a great purpose. But putting them on yourself, I mean, it could be stressful. I mean, there's nothing more annoying as bubbles you just can't get out. That is, until now, thanks to the longtime sponsor of the show, Dbrand's Prism 2.0. Y'all, it has never been easier, at least for me, right? It's an edge-to-edge scratch-resistant glass, aka it's really protective, fingerprint resistant, and apparently so easy to use that Dbrand literally trademarked it as the idiot-proof screen protector, right? And Dbrand, as a company, they take protecting your devices seriously. One, because they care, and two, they probably don't want to deal with your bitching online, which I love. That's 2 for 2. It's why I use their phone cases. Like their premium grip, it's better than other phone cases because their grips have added textures. And in addition to those grippy microscopic ridges, they add liquid black grip strips to the sides of the grip case. And its slim design, it doesn't get in the way of you actually using it. And not that it'll happen because of the grip, but I love the military grade drop protection and the clicky buttons that are addictively fun to use. And my newest skin is the Area 51 collection, right? It actually adds 3D elements. Each of the lines on the design actually has a different height, making it tactile, right? 3D. You don't have to just take my word for it. Go to dbrand.com/PhillyD and check it out for yourself. And then we need to talk about Mary Cooper, because she was on the brink of death, struggling to breathe when doctors dramatically swooped in at the last minute to save her life. But the big thing is that they did so completely against her wishes, right? She signed a do not resuscitate order, and by ignoring it, doctors put her and her family in a painful situation that they hope to avoid. And unfortunately, her story isn't some crazy one-off. Instead, it's just one of many that highlights an ongoing crisis in the medical community, with confusion around DNRs that leaves doctors unclear on what's required of them and patients uncertain that their wishes are going to be respected. Because again, Cooper is just one of the many people who have tried to make their wishes on resuscitation clear, with her daughter, Sherry Uphold, telling the New York Times, "My mother's religious belief is when it is her time to go, that's God's choosing, not hers." She was very adamant about that. And so as a result, Cooper had a do not resuscitate and do not intubate order on file for decades. And then when doctors found cancer cells in her stomach last winter, she filled out new copies explicitly stating that she did not want medical staff to take measures to restart her heart if it stopped or to give her a breathing tube. And at least on the surface level, DNRs are very straightforward, where they basically say that if a person's heart stops, and in some states if their breathing stops, medical staff shouldn't perform CPR, give medications to restart the heart, or take other resuscitative steps like intubation, ventilation, or defibrillation. But that proved to be much more complicated for Cooper when she went to the hospital in February for a stomach scope to determine how serious her cancer was. Because when Uphold went to visit her mother in the recovery room, she found her panicking, gesturing that she was unable to breathe. So Uphold called for help and was escorted into a waiting room while a medical team called an emergency code, with a medical record showing that Cooper became more distressed and uncooperative, so the medical team restrained her and inserted a breathing tube down her throat, thus saving her life while violating the explicit wishes stated in her medical chart. So Uphold, she was pissed, but when she confronted the doctors, they couldn't explain why her mother was intubated when she had made it very clear that she never wanted to be given a breathing tube. And then, when Cooper woke up, she started trying to pull at the tubes and IV lines in her body, with her motioning to her daughter and the doctors that she wanted the breathing tube removed, and Cooper herself later telling the Times, "They had me tied down. I was scared to death," with Uphold finding herself in the exact situation that she and her mother wanted to avoid. But her hands were tied, or as she told Cooper at the time, if you take that out, you're committing suicide, and if I take it out, I'm murdering you. I won't do that. The breathing tube was then left in, and Cooper became very sick, developing pneumonia and going into septic shock. By the time that she was actually finally stable enough to have the tube removed and go home on hospice care, the sickness and intubation had left her incredibly weak, limiting her mobility. So now she deals with horrible anxiety, waking up most nights grabbing for imaginary tubes. And this is she also now needs in-house care 24/7 and is unable to bathe, dress, or cook for herself. And because her family can't afford full-time caregivers, they end up providing most of her care. And this is Cooper remains angry at the doctors who say